Hi, this is Grandpa from Grandma and Grandpa Read, and today's book is called Jangles. It's a big fish story. It's by David Shannon, who does the No David books. A big fish story. When the sun goes down and the weather's just right, Big Lake gets smooth as glass and a thin mist whispers across it. That's when you might catch a glimpse of Jangles. My father told me lots of stories, but my favorite was about a giant trout he saw when he was a kid. I still remember sitting with him in front of the big stone fireplace at the cabin. He pulled out a dirty green tackle box and shook it a couple of times so it rattled. Then he told me this story. When I was a kid, Jangles was the biggest fish anyone had ever seen or heard. That's right, you could hear Jangles. He had broken so many fishing lines that his huge, crooked jaw was covered with shiny metal lures and rusty old fish hooks of all shapes and sizes. They clinked and clattered as he swam. That's why he was called Jangles. Jangles was so big, he ate eagles from the trees that hung out over the lake and full-grown beavers that strayed too far from home. Whoa, that is a big fish. But he didn't seem to care much for the taste of kids. In fact, people swear one time Jangles saved a baby who fell into the lake when his family's canoe tipped over. They say he took that baby up so gently that none of the hooks even stuck it, and he swam it to shore. Supposedly, he gave the baby's mama a dirty look as if to say, "What are you doing bringing your precious little baby out here in a tippy old canoe?" Everyone wanted to catch Jangles. They held big tournaments and lots of prize money, but no one could bring him in. He was too smart or too strong, and he lived too deep down in the middle of the lake. They tried all sorts of tricks, like using whole turkeys for bait. Whoa. One fellow even tried dynamite. He threw big cans of tuna fish in the water and waited till he heard Jangles coming. Then he lit a stick of dynamite and tossed it in the lake. I don't know if it hit a rock or something, but that dynamite came flying back out of the water and into his boat and blew it to smithereens. Then he had to swim all the way back to the dock. He said Jangles came up and bumped him on his butt, but nobody believed him. One time, when I was just about your age, I was fishing over the creek where the creek comes into the lake, and my anchor came loose. I was concentrating so hard on catching a fish that I didn't notice I was drifting away out into the middle of the lake, and there wasn't another soul out there, and it was getting dark. Just when I realized where I was, I felt a tug on my line. Not a real big tug, but something was on the other end. I started to reel it in. It was wiggling all right, but it didn't really feel like a fish. I finally got it in, and what do you know? I'd snagged an old fishing rod that somebody else must have dropped out of a boat a long time ago. I started to reel it in that one too. I cranked and finally felt the end of it getting closer to the surface. Then I heard a sound like that made my whole body feel all prickly. It was kind of soft at first, tinkle, tinkle, dingle, but then it started getting louder. Tingle, jingle, jangle. Now I used to daydream all the time about catching Jangles, but right then I was scared to death. Just when I saw the lure on the end of the line, a gigantic shadow came out of the deep darkness and swallowed it up. My rod bent nearly in half. I was hanging on to it like it was my first dollar. Then Jangles suddenly swam under the boat and pulled me right over the side and into the cold black lake. Down we went like a crazy horse and buggy. Pretty soon I noticed I could still breathe and the water wasn't cold anymore. Finally, we came to a cave in the deepest part of the lake. It was decorated with all parts of old boats and lots of rods and reels. "This is my home," said Jangles. "It's been a long time since I had a visitor." His voice was so low and soothing, it seemed perfectly natural that this fish was talking. So I wasn't afraid at all. Then Jangles told me stories, amazing, wonderful stories about the beginning of the earth, before there were people, and stories about wise old redwood trees and animals who were silly, and the great fish that lived before him in Big Lake. It was like Jangles was my magic uncle. After a while, I started to get sleepy, and he said, "Time to go." He told me to hang on to the big fin on his back. I still had the old rod in my hand, and as we swam up and the water turned from black to purple, I slowly pulled out some line and made a bunch of long loops. When we reached the surface, Jangles swam alongside my boat. Quick as a minnow, I hopped off the fish's giant back and threw the coils of line around him. Then, with a sharp yank, I spun him upside down. Now, you might not know this, but when you turn a fish upside down, even a big old smart fish like Jangles, it gets confused and can't hardly move, like it's paralyzed. "Gotcha," I shouted. Jangles just lay there, but he could still talk. "You tricked me," he cried. "I told you secrets from the beginning of time, and this is how you thank me?" "You are a fish," I said. "I have caught you." "Set me free," Jangles urged. "I am more than a fish. I am a storyteller, and a story no one will believe if I let you go," I replied. Then Jangles asked me, "Is that more important than doing what is right?" I thought of all the wondrous things I'd heard that day. Then I thought about people dragging whole turkeys around the lake. "You're right," I said. "I'm sorry. I will set you free. But what can I do to apologize?" "I swear," Jangles grinned at me with the big crooked jingly jaw of his. "There is one thing you can do to help me," he said, "and it would also prove you caught old Jangles." That's when my dad stopped telling his story and gave me his tackle box. It was full of, to the top, with shiny metal lures and rusty old fish hooks of all shapes and sizes. He never told anyone about catching the giant fish. He kept it a secret until that night when he told me, and now I'm telling you. So he got all those lures out of Jangles' mouth to keep. Isn't that a good story? That's a big fish story. Well, remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and watch the David Shannon playlist.